Campers, it's me, Ari Lehman, the first Jason Voorhees. From Friday the 13th, I'm here with AJ, and he's got the juiciest.
What makes a horror film kill memorable, terrific, even in some way profound or poignant? Let's explore. Thanks for checking this out. If anything about it trips your fancy, please like, subscribe, and share.
Oh, yes.
Without further ado,
we're trying to have Dory's pub declared a landmark. Mrs. Deagle's trying to take his lease away.
Word of today's subject precedes her appearance.
His too, huh?
Yeah, she says it's a dive, a public nuisance.
Establishing her negative impact on the community as Billy and Kate discuss her intentions to destroy a town institution.
That's what my dad proposed to my mom, you know.
That's where everybody's dad proposed to their mom. Cross your teeth.
Speak of the devil, the lady herself is on her way, and it looks like Frosty made the mistake of crossing her. And she's parading his head around town as a warning to others.
Good morning, Mrs. Deagle.
What's good about him?
Oh.
No, I'm not a morning person either, but she's beyond rude. Anything even approximating a handout.
Mrs. Harris, what are you trying to tell me?
I'm afraid that neither one of us will be paid for 2 weeks.
Even a small deferment.
Couldn't you get Mr. Corbin to just give us a little more time?
Is out of order. Mrs. Deagle really relishes the holidays.
The bank and I have the same purpose in life, to make money.
So many opportunities to cut hope off at the knees.
Not to support a lot of deadbeats.
And watch it crawl around and struggle.
Mrs. Deagle, it's Christmas!
In a growing pool of its own blood.
Well, now you know what to ask Santa for, don't you?
Total exsanguination. With hope slain. It's time to address Frosty's ignominious fate.
This is what's left of my imported Bavarian snowman. Your dog broke it this morning.
Blame for Frosty's decapitation laid at the paws of Billy's faithful pup Barney. Small town nice. Without question, he offers compensation.
I'll be more than happy to.
I don't want money.
Ooh, looks like for this one, he'll need a jar, some alcohol, and a shears. Because it's pretty clear she wants to take his balls. That small town nice can really back you in a corner.
I want your dog.
That's even worse.
Give him to me.
Still, quite a relief the neutering will remain symbolic.
I'll take him to the kennel. They'll put him to sleep.
The underlying sadism she exhibits so openly.
It'll be quick and painless compared to what I could do to him.
Makes me suspect whatever she's up to behind closed doors is well beyond the pale.
I'll catch the beast myself.
I'm just saying, you wouldn't want to be the mouse still alive when she finds you stuck in one of those already sinisterly cruel sticky glue traps.
Then he'll get what he deserves. A slow, painful death.
If her meanness, hell, downright cruelness, were represented as veracity, the vacuum surrounding her would make a constant sucking sound her harbinger, as she sponges all the joy, happiness, and everything else good from the world around her. Barney has about had enough of her BS. And launches himself into even bigger trouble. How exactly all this transpires is a little baffling, but I suspect Mrs. Deagle threw herself on the floor. Let's review the footage. One more time, on repeat. Looks to me like she's scuttling away, not falling backwards uncontrollably, so her theatrics are a devious bid for sympathy. Would not be surprised if she's up to these kind of attention-grabbing shenanigans enough to be diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome. Unfortunately, Barney creates good reason to take her side.
Are you alright?
Mrs. Deagle milks while the milking is good.
I have a very weak heart. I can't stand a shot like that.
But her need to express indignation reveals her health scare for what it is, more temper tantrum than medical emergency.
Barney wouldn't have hurt you, Mrs. Deagle, honestly.
Excuses. You're just like your father.
And unbraiding in front of the girl you like that smears your bloodline is always wonderful.
I've listened to his miserable excuses for 10 years, the loser.
Is that not just the way? Don't the wealthy just have it the worst?
Well, we can certainly say you're not afraid to be reductive.
In Mrs. Deagle's case,
As for you mangy cur.
she evidently needs to take all her pent-up angst and sorrow from her privileged existence out on house pets.
I'll get you when you least expect it.
Can anything be put past her? She has no problem playing it for all it's worth.
Oh, my heart! Oh.
Histrionic so obvious, she sure likes playing victim, should never be rewarded, but she wields too much power not to capitulate to her cartoonish performance.
I must apologize for this most unusual.
Mrs. Deagle would likely go on unchecked forever had a certain loser not shelled out a Benjamin, a little north of $325 adjusted for today's dollars, so spendy for a guy whose best currency is excuses, for a unique Christmas gift. Because young men love to be sidled with, I would say pets, but that seems a wrong descriptor for...
I just call him Gizmo. He seems to like it.
So responsibilities that require more care than a purse dog, a rather fragile creature, a mogwai, has been put in Billy's care.
Try not to listen much, okay?
Billy's pappy Rand had no clue what he was getting his son and his community into, but such are the perils of being the fool who rushes in. Had he known that spilled water...
And keep them away from water. Don't get them wet.
...would cause multiplication and a late-night snack...
Never feed them after midnight. You got it?
Sure, kid, whatever you say.
...would lead to cocooning and metamorphosis into nefarious reptilian monsters with a penchant for trickery and sabotage. He might have reconsidered pulling the trigger on that one. The devil is in the details. Once unleashed, the Gremlins pursue mayhem with a gusto befitting the scary little terrors they are, creating havoc and pandemonium wherever they go. Transforming Kingston Falls into their personal amusement park with the kind of antics that get people and gremlins alike killed. It's that kind of party. Hijinks, tomfoolery, monkey shines, outright running amok. It's like homecoming week in a college town. Once the mischievous mischief makers are running rampant, they of course turn their hazardous attention to the particularly deserving Mrs. Deagle. And pay her a Yuletide visit. Not because she's worthy of whatever retribution that will befall her, mind you, but because, unlike her, they judge everyone equally. It's maybe ironic that a bunch of out-of-control marauding tricksters show up, and teach her accountability can be forced even on her, a lady ensconced in her ivory tower.
Kopeck, you stop that, you bad kitty.
Wig off for the evening, she's having a quiet night alone with bunches of cats. In my experience, cat ladies are neither crazy nor cruel. So she's an outlier, perhaps identifying with their sadistic playfulness and varmint disemboweling qualities.
She's a good kitty.
Showing both directions.
That is such a nifty staircase chairlift. Anyhow, even in the calming company of her faithful felines, showing the corrosiveness of her nature, she's waiting around hoping to be set off.
Christmas carolers. I hate Christmas carolers.
If it ever came to light she had a torrid affair with the pre-reformed Grinch,
The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
I would find it weird, but I wouldn't be surprised.
You're a rotter, Mr. Grinch. You're the king of sinful sots.
I think she'd find all that a turn-on, but I digress. What she considers the worst kind of noise pollution reaching her ears, the assemblage outside her door has her hackles up, and her blood roiling and boiling. Spreading their infernal good cheer and positive tidings, how insensitive to her heartlessness can they be?
Preaching boys, no blue sniffers.
Only instead of the jolly, cherubic, red-cheeked, wide-eyed faces she expects to douse in water, she encounters a chorus of bizarre monsters.
Aren't you
Not able to reconcile the unbelievable craziness before her, and absolutely terrified to boot. She naturally retreats and slams the door in their ugly green faces. Not aware they are already inside, she locks herself in. It would seem the appearance of inexplicable monstrosities has her thinking strange thoughts. Like all the ill will, cruelty, and plain bad faith she has disseminated throughout her life has boomeranged back on her. Her heart jumping around like a rat in an electrified cage. At this point, she might actually be having that medical emergency.
I'm not ready.
In a situation like this, who is? Does she regret her bad ways? Or is her regret purely self-centered, for the time she won't have to ruin more lives, for what life she's denied? For the purposes of this story, we'll go with the latter. She engages her staircase chairlift. Completely unaware the diabolical gremlins have generously rewired it. For what turns out to be a lightning-fast escape, straight out of the house. That was quite a departure. Some might say she was getting a bit flighty. She always did love to fly. That sort of thing could get her labeled a shooting star.
That's enough.
Yeah.
I guess it's true that landing is the hardest part. Okay, that's the last one.
My God, Fry. That was Mrs. Deagle.
That it was indeed. Big emphasis on was, since ding dong, the witch is dead.
That escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Later on, her wig will appear and show that drag is so ubiquitous, it extends even to the gremlin community. Exits can be extraordinary for many reasons. Sometimes purely because the execution of the sequence is pitch perfect, sometimes because the recipient is just so deserving of the comeuppance, or sometimes because the whole thing rises to a heart-pounding level of spectacle. In the case of Mrs. Deagle's fatality, it's a hat trick. Mrs. Deagle is a small-town tyrant who forfeited all decency in the name of acquisition, and seeing her get her just desserts is tasty. Were this the only purpose for her demise, I would chalk this up to another instance of audience satisfaction. But in her case, she gets such a well-orchestrated kill, meeting that aforementioned criteria of spectacle, which in itself plays right into gremlin lore. It on every level achieves nuance and breadth, without the character involved being particularly deep or well-rounded. With few brushstrokes and flourishes, the film paints quite a portrait of Mrs. Deagle. A sourpuss, a fuss budget, a grump, and more than a little curmudgeonly, she's the kind of old biddy with such a bad attitude you cross the street to avoid getting too close to her yard. Brush a blade of grass, and she's bound to threaten civil litigation.
Watch it, watch it, watch it!
You get the idea she didn't volunteer at town events. Coffee and chit-chat were her anathema. Socialize at church. Better not sit in her pew. Or belong to a card club. Why endure company when she's the only one worth being around? And if you thought for even a second she contributed to the local bake sale, you'd be sadly mistaken. She wouldn't bake a cookie if her life depended on it. Pity the telemarketer who dials her. The privilege of not making a sale would likely come with a rebuke and a lecture. A modern Scrooge may be a mite crueler, greedier, and more miserly. She was single-handedly stripping the local working class of a living wage, so she could consolidate her already immense wealth. Why? Acquisition was her only means of judging value in anything. Shut down industry and foreclose on homes? Why not? That's capitalism. Crush the weak and small, especially if they have little ones to raise. The sadder their little faces, the better. That's a great indicator of success. It means you're really putting the screws to the peasant class.
She's such a bitch.
Based on her blatant histrionics, I would guess in high school she plagued whoever was in charge of the school-wide play, intent on getting the lead role. And her heart was broken when her biggest rival was cast instead, because she was resoundingly better. Maybe insight into her villain origin. Such a rejection could have led to disillusionment with the arts, and set her on the path of cold hard attainment. Just a theory. Deeming everyone else as below her, she seemed very isolated by proclivity, maybe even in some way lonely. Such was her plight based on the life she chose. Someone who placed more value on money than in human needs, she was taught a valuable lesson that might have come in handy had it not come right at the end of her life. Namely, in a crisis, when disaster strikes, status and money mean little, and being totally alone only augments the likelihood you'll meet a bad end. If she seems to be almost comically villainous for a little old lady and what's supposed to be a crowd pleaser, that was by design. Sometimes a character is developed as one-dimensional for a reason, such as a villainess in a fairy tale.
Got to be pretty foxy, didn't you? Wow!
That way, how the audience feels about them is untroubled by nuance, and their ultimate retribution unmarred by any emotional complexity.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, my world!
Apropos because Gremlins, rife with adventure, violence, and morals, is unquestionably a modern fairy tale, and operating in that parlance. Every such yarn needs an arbitrary wielder of power who strikes fear in the common folks, one who usually gets a heaping helping of their just desserts. Mrs. Deagle was definitely cast from the mold that was used to form Amira Gulch.
That dog's a menace to the community. I'm taking him to the sheriff and make sure he's destroyed. Destroyed?
Only in her case she was the rich old biddy wanting to get a dog euthanized, and the wicked witch all wrapped up in one despicable character.
So, you won't take warning, eh?
Mrs. Deagle was that bitchy lady who revels in being despised and hated, and making underlings bow and grovel. Having a heart 3 sizes too small didn't just harden her towards the misfortunes of others, it gave her a taste for the misfortunes of others. So much so they were her ambrosia, and she sucked it all up greedily. When her own time came, she was a coward. The irony is that it probably never dawned on her that as the horrible local everyone was forced to bend the knee to, her extraction from the community,
the bizarre demise of Mrs. Ruby Deagle, widow of convicted stock swindler Donald Deagle,
was likely looked upon as the silver lining of the whole harrowing event.
seems to spell an end to the controversy.
Don't chew that. Don't chew.
Since despite some deaths and a lot of insurance claims not likely being paid, at least they won't have to deal with Mrs. Deagle anymore, an impacted tooth and an otherwise healthy mouth. Thus, the Gremlins relieve the town of one of those aches no amount of pain relievers can touch, and require greater intervention to alleviate. Upsides? Originally, elements were included that would have cast her in a more sympathetic light, but all that was expunged when it was decided a less gray, more black and white approach was the best plan. Why convolute things after all?
I knew you'd see reason.
I think it was a wise decision. In real life, few people are a caricature of evil free of conflicting facets, but in a fantastical fairy tale of a film such as Gremlins, Engendering any sympathy for Mrs. Deagle would have been tantamount to making all the evil stepmothers have some corresponding trauma that lets them off the hook for their evilness, because they have problems and understandable issues, and it's not really their fault. Since this film was intended to include younger audience members, the kills had to be few and far between, and all finesse and flash when they do come. They had to pack a punch visually, without being too gory. And what's punchier than launching a mean-spirited shrew arcing across the night sky? Some comeuppances just have to be stunning and fantastic to live up to the level of villainy the baddie exuded. Thinking of a mean older woman as a baddie comes with the territory here. I personally don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who would happily torture man's best friend.
Maybe I'll put him in my spin dryer on high heat.
That'd do it all right.
I like to speculate about what was found in her house afterward. Old black and white 8mm footage of rough whips and chains BDSM, Nazi memorabilia, stuffed house cats, a large and varied collection of death masks, a mummified Old West outlaw procured from a sideshow, an original Steely Dan, unflattering Polaroids of her neighbors with inflammatory descriptions, a signed and framed still of then-President Ronald Reagan from his B-movie days, particularly Bedtime for Bonzo, perhaps a second set of under-the-table books revealing a vast criminal enterprise, or a miscarried fetus in a jar, or a plaster cast of her dearly departed husband's ding-a-ling, or just about anything. She seemed like a weird lady with an almost fetishistic enjoyment of torturing animals, so I wouldn't put anything past her.
Oh, Lord.
What's kind of funny is that, under different circumstances, the Gremlins might have been her minions. I've about reached the end of the rope, so I won't leave you dangling. Thanks for hearing out my chitter-chatter. Please share any refutations, opinions, accusations, japes, or other ideas in the comments below. And please join me for whatever I'm up to next time. Bye now.
Bye, creepy man. Keep it creepy.
He's a weird guy.
Goodbye. Rat you and your dog.
Barney?